Working with U.S. Census summary files. Up to now in the course, we've seen a lot of different types of data sets that are produced by the U.S. Census Bureau and possibly some other sources that you may have encountered, and all of this coming under the category of demographic data. In this video, what I'd like to do is introduce you to working with the census summary files in a little bit of detail. A lot of you have worked through the exercise, hopefully, by now. I think it was exercise 4 where we used the Esri data download sites and worked with the Tiger data, and you also joined a set of summary file 1 data that Esri had on their site over to the Tiger data to do a table join and essentially make your graphical features more usable by adding some attribute data to them. Now that's basically what the summary files do, is they give you lots and lots of attribute data, and if processed correctly you can use this data in a lot of different ways. With the Esri data that we saw, Esri had taken a lot of the legwork, so to speak, out of it for you by not only generating the Tiger files themselves, but also generating those summary files. And in doing so, they didn't really use all of the summary file 1 data even. They used a subset of that. And they pulled that out of the original data sets with some software that you've hopefully downloaded and installed by now. I'm going to pan over, if I can, to the screenshot of that. The software I'm referring to is what I call the GIS Tools, and they're basically a set of freeware that's made available by Dr. Bruce Ralston in the Geography Department at the University of Tennessee. And the website is I've given it to you in the class links, I believe, but just in case, it's at http://10tn@geog.utk.edu/download-free.htm, and you'll see, as you should be able to see in this shot, that it's titled Software, Freeware, and Related Files. If you scroll down the page, you will see a set of links to the software, the different types of programs, and those of you that were in the 101 class, we worked with a little bit of this in there, especially the Tiger to Shape program. I'll try to highlight some of these as I go through it, and the DLG to Shape program. And in this class, we'll work with the summary file SF1 to table, and today we're going to see the SF3 to table Pro. The difference in the Pro version is it will let you do things in bulk. This software is very kind of them to make this available for free. This used to sell for several $100s per program at one time. So you've got hundreds of dollars worth of software here that you can get for free, and it's very, very useful. Saves you enormous amounts of time in working with this data. So what you need when you download these, like I say, hopefully you've done it already, but if not, make sure to get what they call the setup program, and go ahead and get the user manuals. They're PDF files. You may or may not have to read through all of those, but you'll have them if you need them. There's some useful information in there, and it's kind of hard in this video course to be able to go through all of the details. So some of this stuff you'll want to read through these manuals and things on your own if you're interested in more details than what I provide to you. When you get these summary file to table programs, like I say, the main ones we'll probably use in this one is the summary file 3. The summary file 1 it does have more data than what the Esri site has for you, but they cover the basics, and we're not going to get into so much detail in here that you're going to probably even have to use this summary file 1 to table converter, but let's go ahead and download it and install it just in case. There may be some variable you come across when you're doing some research that you want to get that's not in the Esri files. The big variable that most people want that we'll use for this summary file 3, and the one I'm going to use for a demonstration in this example, is income data. Keep in mind that if you remember from looking through the data sets, census data sets PDF that I posted earlier in the semester for you, the summary file 3 data and the summary file 4 are both taken from the sample data set that was given out to like 1 in every 6 people, and so it's based on sample estimates, and the summary file 1 and 2 was related to the 100% count. Okay, and also in the summary file 3, the data is really only available down to the block group level of detail, and sometimes it's only available down to the tract level, depending on the response rate and that kind of thing. You know, the Census Bureau has a responsibility to not reveal personal information. So if it comes down to some kind of account that's only a couple individuals, a lot of times they'll bounce it up either to the tract level or just put a not available in the data set. So a lot of you, when you're working on your projects, you'll want the income data. And I've told you elsewhere that, you know, when you get down to the final stage of your projects, you might want to use block or block group level data. It's perfectly fine to use this block group data for the income, even if you're using block level data for some of your other variables. At least it's okay with me. So like I say, the example we're going to work through today is we're going to pull out some income data out of this summary file 3 table. So here's the page for the software. Download it if you haven't already and install it. It's pretty easy to install. And let's move on. Now, when you go to the Census Bureau's home page, which you're probably very familiar with by now, where we want to go to get to the data sets, or go to American Fact Finder, and from here we'll want to go down to click on Data Sets over here, and in the little pop-up that comes up, you want the decennial census. Oops, my session has expired. There we go. Once you click on the decennial census, you'll see they've got 2 tabs here for the 2000 and 1990 census. There was a lot more data available in 2000, as you can see from here, up to the 4 summary files and some other data. In 1990, there's only summary file 1 and 3. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on comparing different years of the census. Again, this course is just mainly to give you an introduction to working with some of this data. Feel free to explore on your own if you want to on some of these other years of data. There's a data for 1980 out there, but we're going to focus on the 2000 data sets. And in 2000, the data began to become much greater amounts of data available, much more of it digital form. You're really starting to see a lot of tools that you can use in GIS and stuff coming out of this 2000 level data, and it's just a lot easier to work with. So we're gonna focus on this, and when you notice the drop down here, they have little tabs starting with summary file 1, 2, 3, etc. And then to the right you get this detail that pops up. So let's click on summary file 3, and you can see how the detail shifts down to there. And you've elsewhere already looked at some of these maps, making thematic maps and exploring some of the stuff in Fact Finder. Some of these tables are all interlinked and you get to them from different sources and things, but there's information here that can be very useful just for exploring some of this. So you might want to play around with the thematic maps and just make some different maps to look at to learn about some of this. And they also have the technical documentation here, which you'll probably want to download and just to have for reference. Now keep in mind that some of this technical documentation can be very detailed. For example, I've opened this up. I want to drag this onto my page. Hopefully this is picking up on the recording. But you can see the main summary file 3 technical document is 1,270 pages long. So, but still, you'll want to download that because there are a lot of information in there A lot of this data, there's like 800 and something individual tables of information just in the summary file 3. But a lot of the beginning pages of this gives you some good introduction to this data set and gives you just some basic information that can be very useful, and explain a little bit more about the data to you. And the all-important data dictionary is also included in this document. So data dictionaries can be very useful. Let me just go ahead and scroll through this document in a few places to just kind of show you some of this information. So just bear with me here as I kind of scroll through it. You can see they have information on the tables, item by item. They've got variable by variable, telling you the variable number, telling you what it is, telling you the universe, the all-important universe, and then the total number of data cells that's stored in this data. Now, these data files are really just a string of numbers separated by comma delimiters, and it goes on for many records. And so you need a good code book to make some sense out of this data. Now, that said, these documents go into so much detail that it can be very overwhelming, and that's why I'm going to keep this example somewhat simplistic. We're going to work with a specific variable or two, and I'm going to show you how to find that and pull that out, and you can apply this same process to any of the other variables you might be interested in. So when you're working on your project, if you haven't already identified all of the 3 or 4 variables that you're looking for example, you might scroll through some of these documents and just see what kinds of data are available in there, and maybe pick a variable or two out from the documents that might be of interest to you. Again, referring back to the projects, I'm more interested in getting you to just work with some of this data and get familiar with it that way than I am all of them being scientifically correct. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to work with what I've already picked out in advance to save time here, and I've looked at what we call median household income. And I already have looked elsewhere, and I'll show you some of these documents as I scroll through some of them, but I've identified that it is variable number P52. Now there's other variables around that seemed a little interesting to me as well. So let's scroll down to that and see. And you'll see over here, this one's beginning with P. The P stands for population. They have some variables in 4 or 5 different categories in this summary file 3 data. Some for population, some for households, and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit here, and here is P52, and you see it's coming under the category of income. All of the variables around this P52 are related to income. P52 is your household income in 1999, which was when the actual census was taken or began, and for 2000. And here you see that the universe is household. Now, universe, what they mean by universe is what does that data represent? In other words, for variable 52, we're looking at the household income amongst all of the households. Okay, that's our universe. A lot of times you can think of the universe as something that you might want to normalize your data by. And I'll put a separate document on our website talking about normalization. Normalizing is basically divide, and think of it as dividing by. So like if you were looking at some sample of households, for example, for a variable income or any other variable, if the universe was households, then when you're looking at it, some subset of that, you could divide that by the total households basically, and that would be normalizing that variable. More on that a little later. So variable 53 here is the actual one that we're interested in. I said 52 earlier, but this one is the median household income, and the universe is households. Now over here on the right, as I mentioned, it tells you the number of cells, and this is basically how many, think of it as how many records goes with that data type. And the reason I'm interested in the median household is because you see it's just one. It's going to keep it simple. There's just one data record in that field. So there's just one number there. When we're looking at household income, for example, there are 17 different items there. And as we'll see a little later, that's because they've broken it down in ranges of income. So how many people make between this amount and this amount of income, and this amount and this amount of income, right all the way starting with a low amount all the way up to the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that can be very detailed, and in some cases you might need that detailed information. You might want to target somebody that's making over $100,000 as one of your variables, for example, and so you're looking at how many people make that amount of money in your area. So in that case, you might want to go with the household income. But like I said earlier, for this example, we'll stick with the median, and it's very simple with just one number here. Now another variable that's interesting, let's see if it shows up in this one, is it's in the 70s, and that would be the here we go, the median family income. Okay, and this one's also just one variable, and it's very similar to the median household, except in this case we're talking about everybody in the family being counted. Okay, and the other one was based on, I think, the householder, what they consider that the person answering the survey, basically. So some of these are a little confusing, and again, you've got 1,200 pages worth of documentation here. If you want to read more about it, you can explore through all of this. But we'll look at, just for fun, we'll maybe get a couple of these. We might get 53 and 77 down just to compare them. So let me scroll through just a little bit more of this and show you that they go into more detail on some of this. This is just like, think of it as a summary of the variables that's in that data set. And let me scroll on through. Here is a more detailed that tells you the actual information under each variable. Okay, so let's scroll down to the 53 on this one, and we can look at some of the variables around that as well. And here again, you see on 53, median household income, telling us the universe is households, just median household income in 1999. Now, if you look at the household income that we mentioned earlier, that had 17 different separate items in that variable, you'll see here how they're broken down. You've got a total amount, then you've got less than 10,000, all the way up to 200,000 or more. So when you get the data, you'll have a record for each one of these amounts, so you could actually see how many people make between certain ranges of amount of income in your area of interest. So that's kind of interesting. And so this is a little bit more detailed of a code book here. Scroll further down into chapter 7 and you get to the actual data dictionary, and the data dictionary is probably the most detailed amount of information on these data sets. And you'll see that they have, let's just to be consistent, let's go to variable P53 again. You scroll up here, I went too far. Okay, and oops, I'm in the percentages instead of population. This jumps pretty fast when I'm scrolling that way. Here we go. Well, actually, we're back to where we started. Hang on just a minute. I'm going to pause it while I find it down here. Okay, now we're getting closer here. Okay, and here you can see from the top it's telling you the table number. Again, they think of this data, just the word the census uses is tables. So all of this data got summarized by tables for these different variables. So table number 52 was the total household income. Again, there's the amounts, and here are the actual variable names. Once this data gets processed, and you end up with a DBase file that you pull into ArcGIS, it will have these names for the field names that I'm highlighting here. It tells you information about this segment is the file number that it's in. It's in file number 6, and we'll see a little more about that later. And this tells you the size of that variable. In other words, it's a maximum size of 9 spaces that it could occupy in the data record. So when I told you this information is really a bunch of numbers separated by columns, there can be up to 9 spaces allowed for each one of these variables. So in a true code book, you would also have a spot that would say where that began on a given line. For example, this variable might begin in position number 275, and it would go over 9 spaces to 283 or something like that. So so this is what they're calling a data dictionary. So here's your most detailed amount of information that I've seen on each of these variables. Now, you would think that there would be an easy document you could go to just get a very detailed explanation of what do we mean by median household income. And I have not really found such a source. It may exist, but most of these are self-explanatory somewhat, but still it's helpful to kind of have a reference for some more detail. But I'm going to show you the closest thing that I found about this, and hopefully it will capture it on the screen here. Let me go ahead and close this document. Again, keep in mind that you might want to download this document and just put it in your reference files, and you can get to that back out here on the Fact Finder page under the technical documentation. But one way of getting to, let's go ahead and just pretend that we're going to make a map. And let's see if we can find this variable here. Hopefully this will work. Hang on just a minute. Let me scroll back here. Okay, I'm going to enter it by a table number here. And we want, let's see, table P dot 53. This might work, I'm not sure. Just bear with me here. Okay, it's saying not available, but it's giving me a list of all the variables here in this table. So let's scroll down here and get to it this way. We'll find P53. What I'm doing is just pretending I'm going to make a map here using their Fact Finder program. So there's P53, the median household income. Let's say next. And then let's just add, pretend we're looking at the whole nation, adding the U.S. and show us the results. And it gives us the results here. The average for the U.S., the median household income is $41,994. Up at there at the top, you'll notice there's a link to that variable here, has a link to it. And if I click that link, see if I can drag the table. I'm using 2 screens on my part, so I'm having to drag this stuff over to capture it. Hopefully it's picking it up. But it takes us to this table that gives you additional links. You'll find that the census is just full of information here. But it's got additional information that tells us a little bit about how information is derived, like derived measures for income in 1999. If you click on that, it will explain what they're meaning by average and median and mean and that kind of thing. So here's some more information that might help to explain some of the variables if they're not self-explanatory enough for you. That's one source. Another thing you could do is Google it and just check through Google to see what you turn up. I've been turning up lots of things that seem somewhat useful, but it's almost overwhelming, again, the amount of documentation out there. So I'm going to just stick with the basics in this video and just show you some things that are sort of predefined for you in this case to make it simple and be able to get through this example in a timely manner. So there's some sources of information you might want to explore if certain things seem a little confusing. So let's go back out to the American Fact Finder, back out on the home page again, and it will pop up here. Just use the backspace here. And to get to the data, again, there's several ways you can get to this, but if you go to this page a very handy shortcut way, and they kind of hide it down here. If you look in this area right here where my mouse is hovering, it says download datasets via FTP for file transfer protocol. If you follow that link, it will open up another page, and on this page you're actually getting FTP access to all of the, well, I'm not going to say all of it, but a lot of the different types of data that the census has available. And they have lots of README files on all of this stuff. So usually when you go to any page on these links, you'll find some README files. For this example, we want to go down into the summary file 3. So, and we're interested in Census 2000. So I'm going to click, and you see they've got it all the way back to 1980. I'm going to click on Census 2000, and it takes me to a page linking to the data sets. I follow that, and here's a host of information relating to different data sets and at different summary levels and so forth. You'll see there's summary file 1, there's a supplement where they've added a few bits of information to summary file 1, and there's summary file 2, 3, and 4. So let's follow summary file 3. And this is a page you might want to bookmark so you have a shortcut directly to the data later on, because here you'll see they have it organized by states, and for all of the 50 states, and they've got what they call header file documentation and just basic documentation on the file structure. Some of this which is sort of pulled out of the larger document we saw earlier. I'm going to, let's see if we can follow. Let's just do this README file here as an example, and I'm going to have to drag it over from my other screen. Hopefully it's picking up here. And this is about a 10-page document that you might want to print it out just to have it for reference, but it gives you some of the basic information about how these files are organized. And one of the handy things in this, and you'll see this table back out in the main documentation, the 1200-page documentation as well, but it shows here what you're going to see in a minute is there are about 76 different files that goes with every state to complete all of the 800 and something variables in this data set. So for example, think of it as one huge, you can think of it like an Excel spreadsheet. It's really a big database, but think of it in Excel because you've got the rows and columns there. And think of it, each one of these, starting with the number 1, it goes over for 248 different data items, and it starts with the population 1 variable and goes up to the population 14. So it goes over 248, not just well, I guess in this case you could think of it as columns, but it goes over 248 variables, and then they have to go to data set number 2 to expand that. And that's just, I assume, to make these sizes more manageable, because you're going to end up with a table that is 800 and something columns of information, which would be who knows how many different individual spaces of information to try to include it all into one table. So it becomes really unwieldy to do that. So they've broken this master data set down into 76 different individual files containing the data. Now, what this thing is handy for on this listing is that if you know which variable number you're interested in, and I'm going to show you a few other ways to sort of identify that here in a minute, then you can narrow down just the data sets that you actually have to download. Because, for example, as we'll see in a minute, to get all of Tennessee, to get the entire data set for Tennessee, it's about 57 megabytes. If we're just interested in median income, then if we know that it's variable number 54, P54, then this list will tell us that really the only one we need to get is this state summary file number 6, because it includes variables from P51 up to P67. So we'll need to get that one. And I also want to get that variable number 76 or 77, whichever that one was, at the family income. And that's in data set number 7. So I'm only going to have to download for this example data sets number 6 and 7. We also have to get this geography file, is what they call like a header file. And it contains information that's necessary to process any of these 76 data sets. So regardless of the state you're getting, you always have to get what we call the geography header file for that state, as well as the individual files that you need. So let's go and look at some of this now so that you can see this in action here. So that's in that document, and there's a few other bits of information that might be useful. And it's another thing you might want to save and actually print out in this case. So for our example, let's look at Anderson County, since this college is located there. And so we'll scroll down to Tennessee, and here is a listing again that shows you it's got a README file, which is the same README file we saw earlier. And they've got a link to all of the Tennessee data if you want to download the entire data set, and you can see it's 157 megabytes. And we only need data set number 6 and data set number 7, which are each about 5 megabytes. And if I scroll down the list to the bottom, you'll see that the geography header file is the last one in this list. And you'll see that just before that, you'll see the file record number went up to number 76 again. Every state has 76 of these files because they're all set up with the same structure. So let's go ahead and download number 6 and number 7. I'm just going to right click on it and save my target, and my little save me dialog box is popping up on my other window. I'll drag it over here, and it's just like any other download you process. You just have to specify the folder where to store it, and in this case I've created one called Income, and you can see I've already downloaded them in advance, so we don't have to download them again. But they're basically zip files, and so we just download those zip files. And I've already done number 6, number 7, and the geography header file. I've actually already processed it as a test, but we'll reprocess it just for fun. So save those, and just remember, I'll give you a minute to save those, and just don't unzip them. Once you download them, leave them zipped up. Okay, and I'll be back in a moment while you do that. Okay, I've already got mine downloaded. Hopefully you do too, and you'll have 3 files showing up if you look at it with Windows Explorer. And like I said, you don't have to unzip those. I'm going to go ahead and start up my GIS Tools program, and hang on just a moment here, and it should pop up. We want that, oops, hang on, and once it pops up, it's a very simple dialog here, and it gives you instructions here at the top that walks you through it. There's 4 different steps you need to go through. And what's neat is that this program, like I said earlier, can recognize zip files. So it saves you a lot of data space by not having to unzip everything, because these files compress very tightly, and so your 5 megabytes worth of files may unzip into 20 or 30 megabytes once you unzip them. So it's handy to be able to process those as zip files. And the first step we want to take is to add an item over here. So we're going to add the item, and we have to route over to the folder where we have it stored. And I've got mine here, hang on, under example and income. And when you get into that file, you notice it only, even though I've got 3 files in there, it only sees the header file, because this program already knows, as we can see down here, to look for the geo header files. And that's the only option we have, is to look at those. So if you don't have that, you can't process the data with this program. So that's why you have to always get the header files in addition to whichever individual data files you need to get. So we'll say open, and when we open, you can see it adds the file here. Now the difference in this Pro version is we could actually process other states as well by adding more to this. I recommend keeping it simple, just doing one at a time to start with, so you can kind of see how the program works. Try not to end up that way with so many different folders, subfolders and such. So now we move on to the second step. You see you can delete an item if you add it by mistake. Our next step is to choose the tables. Now this is where we're going to actually pick which variables to process out of this data set. So this takes us to a screen. It tells you that how the tables are organized into 5 different groups, and they're organized by population tables, population by race, population to the tract level, housing tables, and housing to the tract level. Now ours is variable P53, P76, I think it was, and that's the population tables. So I'm going to click on population table, and this takes us to a list of all the different available tables on the left hand side, and what we do is pick the one we want and add that to the right hand side. So even if you didn't know which variable at this point you were going to process, in theory you would have known which state and county you were interested in, so you could have downloaded the state data and downloaded your header file and any of the other files that went with that and gotten this far. And that would be one way. Even if you didn't have the information I've showed you already, you see here that they include sort of a description in this list of all the variables. So it's got the variable number and the type here, the name as well. Now I'm going to back up just a little bit here, and I want to show you another download from the GIS tools that you can get. I've already closed that page, so just remember there was some lookup tables on there, and I think I suggested earlier in the semester that you get those as well. And when you download those, you'll find there's one for the summary file 3 and one for the summary file 4. And let's see if I've got those here. I don't, but hang on just a second. I've downloaded them elsewhere. Here we go. And I downloaded them in advance and unzipped them. When you unzip the lookup table, it gives you basically, let me put mine to detailed view so you can see everything in the window here. It gives you 5 different HTML, which is basically just viewable by your browser, types of files, and one of them is SF3 POP. Now if I go into that one, it's going to open up a list here. Let me pause so I can expand the window a little bit here. Here I've expanded my window a little bit so you can see all the variables. But that's the lookup tables actually takes you to a hyperlinked set of the same type of information we saw previously in the program that will describe the variables a little bit for us. So we can scroll down, for example, to, oops, I accidentally clicked one. Scroll down to variable 53, and it will take you, jump down into the table to show you the name and the variable, the full variable number that's going to show up in the field name, and what that variable is, and what the universe is. And again, this is information we saw earlier back out in the master document for the summary file 3. But this is also available here, which can be very handy because this a lot less pages to scroll through for one thing, and it's hyperlinked. So if I want to go back up to the top, I can just click on this and jumps me right to the beginning, and I'm still in the population table, but at least I can jump around in here. If I see any other variables of interest, like the one I mentioned, we might want to look at the median family income. I can jump down to that, and that will tell me the variable name and the universe for that. So another thing to keep in mind when you're exploring, just wanting to browse to see what's available in a certain summary file, these documents can be helpful for that. So now let's bounce back to our program. Let me close a little bit of these windows in the background so it won't be quite so distracting. There we go. And so let's go ahead and add the variables we're interested in to our tables to be created dialog here. So we want variable 53, the median household income. We'll click on the add button. It moves that over to the right hand side. Now we want variable number 77 and add that. And then we're just going to stick with those two for now. We'll keep it simple. And I'm going to say OK. That backs me up. I could go in here and add some other variables from some of the other tables. But I'm again going to keep it simple here. Just pick those two. So we'll say done. Now we're back out at the beginning where we were. And our next item to do is to choose the summary level. Now the summary level is referring to those different hierarchies that we talked about so much, where it's basically, think of it as the Census Bureau has summarized all of the data that they collected to all of these different hierarchy levels. So for example, I can click on counties and I will get the data, those two data variables I picked, I will get the information in my table for Tennessee, for every county in Tennessee, summarized to that county. So basically it will give me the median household income for people living in a certain county. I can do the tracts, which will give me that information for every tract in the state of Tennessee, and I can do down to the block groups. Now remember again, the block level of detail is not available in the summary file 3 data set. So I'm just going to pick these 3 for now. Again, I like to keep it simple, but I want to show you how it's aggregated a little bit here. You may only pick one because you may only need it down to the block group level once you're working with this. but in this example I'm just going to pick these 3, and you'll notice there's a lot of different hierarchy levels here that you could pick, and it's page 1 of 2 here. So when I say next, here's another entire page I could summarize them by. I could summarize them down to congressional district levels, and it's just amazing the number of details that you can pull out of all of this. But basically, for our use, we're just going to work with the counties, tracts, block groups, and blocks. So we'll go next, say OK. That takes us back out to our beginning again. Now we want to set the output directory. Now by default, it's going to put it in the same directory where we started from. And I like to keep it there because it just helps me to keep up with things, assuming I've created a subfolder that makes sense to me about where I had my original data stored. Then it works for me to go ahead and let it default to storing my output into that folder. But you could change it here if you wanted to. I'm just going to say OK, and you'll see for the output directory here that it's added that folder. And now we're ready to go. So let's click on the Go button, and you'll see it showing your process down here in the bottom. It's unzipping things, it's reading them into memory, and it's processing them. And once we're done, which see it doesn't take very long, the program doesn't say anything, it just closes once it's done. So you don't get any finished dialogue or anything like that. Once it closes, it's all done. And now let me go ahead and open up my folder where I was storing things to. And let me scroll back up here. And when I go into that income folder, you'll see now that I have, in addition to the 3 zips, I have a log file and I have 2 subfolders. The unzipped folder, if you remember in the 101 class, and what I'll do, by the way, I'll try to remember to repost the video from where we created Tiger files, because this same set of GIS tools has the TGR to shape, for Tiger to shape program. And that program you can use to create the individual Tiger files if you wanted to. Though in our case, I'm not requiring you to do that. Feel free to use the Esri data where they've already done that for you. But anyway, if you remember back in that program, it created an unzipped folder as well. And if you look into it, it's empty. I think it's just sort of a bug in the program where it doesn't go back and delete that folder once it processes the data. So let's go ahead and delete that folder so we won't forget about that. The log file, I can open that log file up, and just to show you, it's basically just telling you which tables you picked chose to process and that kind of thing, and it tells you when the process ended. So the main folder, we're looking at the Tennessee folder. The program created that for us, and it created these 3 subfolders. So if we had processed other states and so forth, it would have put folders for that, for each state, with these 3 subfolders for all of the variables we were interested in. So we picked 2 variables, so I would expect to see 2 files in there, which we've got the 2 files, and then it's got this header file that it creates. So the header file, in our case, we won't have to pull that header file in. As you'll see in a minute, we'll be able to just pull these 2 in that we process. But it by default creates this header file, which is basically just the summary information that was out there in that header file that was created, or that we used to process the data back when we were selecting the files. So here's our variable number 53 and our variable number 77, data table for each. And we've got that at the county, block group, and tract levels. So we now have our database files. So let's go ahead and open those up into Arcmap and see what it looks like. So we're in Arcmap. And what I've done in this case to save some time, remember we have to get the Tiger files for the appropriate place that we're interested in as well. And that's a separate process, but you should know how to do that by now. And what I've done already is I downloaded from this Esri site, since they had already processed them for me. I downloaded the Tiger files down from the block group, and tract level for Anderson County, and the county level too. And I loaded those in. I also grabbed the summary file 1 data just to have that. And I went ahead, and what was important is you have to remember to open up Arc Catalog first and define a projection for those Tiger files before you can pull them into Arcmap here. And remember, with all of the census data, whether it comes from the Esri site or whether you're processing yourself from the Census Bureau site, you want to go with the projection of geographic with an NAD of 83. So let's go ahead and pull some of those files into our project here. So I'll add, and here's the folder I created for the Tiger data. And I'm going to go ahead and add the 3 levels we looked at here, which were block, county, I'm sorry, not block, but county, block group, and tract. And you'll see it's 47001, which is Anderson County. So I'll add those. And you can see our county's up on top, so it's hiding the detail for the block group. If I turn that off, you see there's the block groups, and there are the tracts. So we have this set of data, and let me switch over to the display tab because that's by default what you'll see to start with. The program switches over to the source tab whenever you add database files. Now I had already added some earlier, which was why mine started there. One nice thing about that source tab, by the way, is it shows you the folder, the subfolder where your data is being pulled from. So that's kind of nice. So let's go ahead and add data. Now we want to add the database files we created. Go to Income, Tennessee. Let's add the county to start with, and let's just process these one at a time. And we'll just use the county level to start with for our 2 variable tables. Pull those in, and now let's just open them up and look at them. I want to open the variable 53 to start with, and the variable 77. Oops. There we go. And you can see they all have an ID number associated with them. You see the record numbers showing up 380, okay, and that's basically there are 380. We know, if you're familiar with the layout of the state, there's 95 counties in the state. So you might say, well, why is there 380 records? Well, if you notice, for each county you'll see multiple entries. So looking at the top, one thing to notice though is both of these files have 380 records in them. But the reason they do is because they're processing each county 4 times with information. You'll notice that there is a record at the first Anderson County here under the geo comp variable is showing us it's blank in there. And basically, it's my understanding anyway that this is the average. This would be the median for the entire county. The next record is dealing with the urban areas in the county, and then we've got rural areas and rural farm areas. Now, to be honest with you, I cannot even remember the exact differences between all of these. The ones we're interested in for now is this first one, which I just tend to think of it as that's the entire county. So right now I don't have a reason to separate urban from rural and that kind of thing. And this, I think, only shows up in the county level of detail anyway. But anyway, since the first record is the aggregate for the entire county, okay, that shows up first throughout the database. So when we do our joins after a while, it's going to grab the first occurrence of Anderson County, for example, and pull that over to our join. So if it were the other way around, we would have to be a little more worried about this, and we basically might want to go through and edit this to take everything out that says urban, rural, or rural farm, and end up with just 95 records. But in this case, we'll be safe because, again, it will pull the first instance that it encounters over when we do our join. And in this case, it will get the correct one. So wanted to point that out. So let's go ahead and do our join. And remember, to do a join, you click on the file that you want it to go to, and right-click on that file, go to Joins and Relates, Join. We're choosing attributes from a table, and choose the field that this is going to be based upon. Now let me again, well, I already started the table, so let me go into the FIPS state and county is the variable we want to use. Okay, and it saw that variable in both. Once I selected it from the data set we're joining it to, then it also automatically sensed which table I wanted to pull data from, and it grabbed the first one, which is okay in this case, and it found that it checked to see if that same variable name exists in that table, and it does, so it automatically picked that variable name. You can see we could have picked any of the others had they been more appropriate for that, but it, you know, the program's smart enough that it looked for that same field name basically for us, and it found that. And in this case, we're going to keep all the records by default and see what happens here. And if it pulls the other ones over, we'll go back and do only the matching records. So we'll pull that over. It says it's not indexed. We could create an index. I'm just going to say no in this case because we're dealing with file sizes that are small enough that it will just take a second to pull it over anyway. So let's open this and see what we get. So we open it. We only had one record to begin with because it was just one county we were dealing with, and we still only have one record. And it pulled basically over for us these sets of fields, starting with the OID that existed in the summary file that we pulled over. There's our variable. If we open that table back up, we can compare. You know, I mentioned to you that it would grab the first one. We want to just make sure of that, and you can see I've still got it highlighted, 35,483, and that is indeed what it pulled over. And it basically pulled over all of these fields and joined them into our table. And so you can see we've got a one-to-one match. And so now we have information associated with that county. Not very useful in this case in and of itself because it's just one county and we only got one record. There's not much to really show with just one. If we had, you know, looking at the entire state, this county level of detail would be much more useful. And remember, as with the summary file ones that you get from the Esri site, now you can see why they represent the entire state, while the downloads we were getting on the Tiger data may have only been for a county, tracts, or whatever associated with a given county. So if you're working with the county data, basically, a lot of times you're going to have more than one county that you're wanting to use this data with. So I just pulled it over to show you an example of how to get that. More interesting is the tract and block group level information for this. So rather than process this other one, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to that level of detail so that you can see it in a little more useful manner. So first, let's go back now. Let's remove our join that we just did, and remove all joins. And let's remove these data files. And now let's add the ones for the block group. I'll skip the tract for now. Let's just do the block group, and we'll add these two files again. So we now have the files loaded, and we want to go ahead and do our joins. And we go to join and relate, and join. And we want to pick out, in this case, we want the STFID field, because the STFID field, let me open my table. Actually, let me go back a minute and let me open the table here. Let's open both tables so we can kind of see them side by side. And remember, you always want to join on the field that's going to give you a unique set of information. If we just join by the FIPS state and county field, for example, you'll see we've got multiple records in there that begin with 47001. So in this case, if we did a join on that, it would just basically take this first record and assign that to all of the record lines in our table that we're joining to, because that one would match first. So what we want is the STFID. Now that one, remember, the STFID gives you the information down to whichever hierarchy level you're dealing with. So we've got a 47 in here for the state of Tennessee, 001 for Anderson County, and 020-100, which is dealing with the tract, and you see that here. And then the group only has one, and it's tacked onto the end, so the 1. That makes this record unique if we use this field. Each of these other fields are not unique. You'll see there's more than one on just the group number because it's repeated. The tract number, also there's several tracts that have the same number because you know, they're tunneling down with this level of detail. For lack of a better way to describe it, Just think of it, the STF ID is your complete identifier that identifies the state, the county, the tract, and the block group in this case. And when you add all those numbers together, you come up with a unique number that's not repeated. So this is the field we want to use to join by. Now in our other table, we don't have a STF ID, they just call it SFID. But you can see that the information in that is the same record length, and that's our identifier that we want to use there basically. And remember, when you're doing the joins, they don't have to have the same name. It just has to represent the same information. So when we do our join this time, unlike before when we did it to the county, it's not going to automatically pick the right field because it won't find a field with the same name. So you'll have to tell it the field to use. So let's go through that process now. So when we open the block groups, and we'll go to join and relate, and we'll select the field in the table we're joining it to, which is our STF ID, and it picks the first table by default. And see that it's picking name because it didn't find anything that matched, so it just found the first character field because this was a character field up here. It's using the first one. We want to change that to the SFID because those are the one-to-one information. And let's just say to keep all the records, which basically if it doesn't find a match, it will still keep that record and it would just have 0 or null values in it. So that would sort of let us know something was going on, that there was some data missing or something. If we tell it to only keep the matching records, it would just drop that from the data set and we wouldn't really know it. So let's keep that on, and we'll say OK, and say no to the index. And now let's open it up and see what we got. And again, let's open the original data table to kind of compare it with. And you'll see, starting with the OID, where it pulled that over. This was the information on this side of the table that we had originally. Here's where it added the information from our table that we processed. And our variable that we're really trying to get at here is the last one over here in this column. And it did pull over the numbers. If you look at this table, it did pull over and match things up, seems to be correctly. We've got the tract numbers here, the tracts here, the block groups 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. You're matching up. It looks good. And we'll see our total records are still 64. And basically, out of this 4014 master data set you can think of for the entire state, it pulled over the 64 that we needed for Anderson County. So it's very important, again, that you pick the right field to do your join on. And also keep in mind that these summary files, again, are for the entire state when you process them. So if you're doing more than one county, then you don't have to download that and process that data every time. You just download it for each state that you're interested in and process the data. So there we have our median household income at the block group level of detail for Anderson County. Now let's just look at that thematically. I'm going to switch back out to the data view, and let's just turn on our block groups, and let's just change our symbology a little bit here. And let's just say we wanted to go with graduated colors, and we pick the value that we're looking at here, and we apply that. And here we have a map for Anderson County that shows us thematically the range in median household incomes. And if you're familiar with the layout of the county a little bit, this area here where you see the darker, the higher values is near Oak Ridge, Clinton and Norris being up in this area. The rural parts of the county up in the mountainous areas up here are the lowest, and pretty low when you look at it, averaging only $11,000 something up to $24,000 median household income. Big difference from $55,000 to $11,000. So you see a lot of range there in the data. And that's what I'm trying to get at with the projects. When you're working on the projects, is you know, hoping you'll end up with some data sets that has some diversity of values in it, and picking 3 different counties to compare these with is going to hopefully give you some diversity there to work with as well. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it this way. This is This is one way to use the data sets to process one particular variable. We also downloaded the family household or family median income. To save time on the video, I'm not going to process that. It would be the same steps as we've done here. But hopefully you can take the information you've seen here in this video and sort of run with it now to compare some other variables that you might be interested in. And if you have any questions, be sure to send me an email and let me know. And I'm going to stop for now and let you try some of this on your own. Just one other word of advice. You might want to rename some of this to more meaningful names. Like instead of just keeping the variable name, remember you can go in and edit some of these things, and you can call them what they really are. So we've got median income, and we might say household. There. And we might compare that with median income per family. They also have aggregate income that shows the total amount of income added together for everybody in certain areas, which is kind of interesting to look at as well. And generally you'll see the same patterns. Where the urban areas are higher and the rural areas are lower. But it's very interesting. Sometimes you see anomalies in the data that are not what you would expect. And so that's the idea here, is to look at some of that information. Just another piece of advice that is interesting, and I don't know if we'll have time to look at it. If we do, you'll see this. But it's very interesting to compare some of this kind of information with voting information. We have available to us as well voting districts, and it's very interesting when you start looking at some variables on income, for example, and comparing that with some of the voting districts as well. That's something that I would encourage you to do if we don't get to do an example in class, with me doing a video for you. Try that on your own to see some of that. It's some very interesting things can turn up, and data is available out there to us to process things right down to household levels. We can get information from other sources, like the state of Tennessee has a base mapping project where they have mapped out parcels all the way, individual parcel properties for people's ownership patterns. And you can actually, with little patience and being thorough with your data, you can creatively come up with some maps that sort of correlate where people are living with maybe even household values to some of this kind of information and some of the voting information. Just shows up some very interesting patterns in the data sometimes. So again, some of this stuff we may look at for examples as we have time, but feel free to try some of this on your own. You now know how to process a summary file 3 data table. The similar process is used for any of the other summary files. And go back and reread some of your information on the descriptions of the different data sets, especially the summary file 1 and 3. Summary file 2 and 4 are basically just more detailed tables broken out by racial groups and things like that. That takes some of this data and looks at it just every way you can want to twist and turn it. I like to show examples that just show the basic total numbers, and that's usually all we get into in our projects. But if you ever have a need to look at certain things by race or just some of the different variables that are out there, it's there. You may just have to dig through those tables a bit to find it. Get the README files. Go back to the page where I showed you in the earlier on in the beginning, where we were on the Fact Finder page, and you can download the documentation file for each of the summary files. And you can, when you go to the FTP site, and you can get that README file for each of the 4 files types. And some of those you might even want to print out, and you have a little handy reference in that you can look through to see some of the variables you might potentially be interested in. Also remember, you can always look up on the lookup tables, and you can go on the Census site and just do a general search for information on certain variables, and a lot of times you'll turn up something useful on that. So have fun, explore with this stuff, and hope you can incorporate some of this into your project.